A car drove into the constituency and 3 guys just lifted AK-47 machine guns and opened fire on them all. One person that had managed to kind of hide under a car had said the gunman went over the top of Blacker after his leg had been basically disjointed with one of the bullets, which ripped it away, and pumped 2 more shells straight through his head. Had I been in Jamaica, I would have been the 4th guy sitting on that pavement. There were good profits, you know, very good profits really, at that time as well. We went 30 years ago. So if you looked at, say, it's conservatively £120,000, £130,000 for the weekend. In today's rate of inflation, that could probably be looked at as maybe £250,000 a week. Yeah, I think half of it was spent on drugs, women and alcohol, and the other half I just wasted. It was a joke. I was born in 1966 at Mother's Hospital in Clapton, East London, now known as Murderers Mile. It's pretty much in the heart of Hackney. My parents, my mother, Mavis, she came to England when she was 19 years old, just slightly after the Windrush. She left her native Jamaica. It was a long journey. At that time, it would have felt for someone coming from an island like Jamaica, like travelling to the moon. She was a very brave woman, but she was incredibly ambitious. She had a fighting spirit. She met my father in 1956. My dad at the time, he was from the East End of London, you know, not too far from here. He was born in Oxton, and he came from a family of builders. One of his friends, funny enough, who he met, one of the first West Indians, was a guy called Billy Hill. And Billy and his wife Sadie were friends with my father, and my father sold Billy paraffin and allowed Billy to establish a route to local West Indians who were living in these areas. Billy had aspirations to want to actually set up a club in 1954, which would have been the first West Indian club in the country. My dad knew he'd have difficulties getting a licence, because to get a dance licence would have been virtually impossible for a West Indian. Coming in would face a lot of racism and stuff like that. So my dad stepped up and became the director of the company for him. And in 1954, they opened the Pepper Pot Club on 60 Green Lanes. At that time, the West Indian community were very close, and they trusted each other and they built collectively together. It was a community family. And they grew. My parents grew, with the skills of my father being a bricklayer, determination of my mum. They started to buy property, and they started to rent property to fellow West Indians in order to give them a little bit of a better lifestyle, because at that time it was very brutal. I remember my mum telling me a story. She had 3 of her friends come over from Jamaica. They were her very, very close friends, and they stayed at the same house. It was owned by a Jewish landlord, because obviously Jewish were the dominant property owners around Stamford Hill and East London. And they were actually the only people that would actually rent to black people, because the racism was so intense at that time. And one day she arrived home from work to find all of her belongings was on the street. So when she wanted to find out what was going on, she was informed that her 2 friends had bought some freshwater coconuts from down at the market, and had obviously came back and tried to break them open on the steps of the house. The landlord was alerted what was going on, and he evicted everybody. And she made a promise to herself she would never be in a position where anyone could, take a roof from over her head. So she was determined to buy things, have property, and be able to shield her people, which she's done. As a young person growing up, racism I found difficult, because I didn't have the experience, so I didn't understand how to deal with it. And, you know, it was a question of being mixed race. I find it hard to find an identity. What do? Are you black? Are you white? What side? You know, giving an ultimatum. What side are you on? Okay. When I got to about 18 years old, I realised an incredibly good trick. Being mixed race, the skin I was given was the greatest asset I ever had, because it meant that I was able to delve deep into both cultures, you know. I could go to any part of, you know, West Kingston, okay? I could, and I have done, you know, to some of the most dangerous garrisons there are, and meet and talk with people, you know, and we hold each other on the same respect. I could go to the most, you know, the deepest dens of East London or South London, you know, and I could sit there with the deepest of Cockneys, the deepest of Britain's underworld, you know, and I can hold the same respect there because I know we speak the same language. And I realised this is the greatest thing ever I've been given, because I'm not putting a tag on myself, you know. I am mixed, and mixed is beautiful because mixed means I'm black and I'm white. I have the best of both worlds. The secondary school I went to was Philip Magnus. It was in the heart of King's Cross, not far from here. It can be described as the breeding ground for criminals, like you have Oxford or Cambridge, where barristers and, you know, lawyers go to. Philip Magnus basically managed to breed some of Britain's most notorious criminals. Amazing, it was such a small school, what he'd done. But I guess that's when I started to turn a little bit bad, and, you know, at that point, I found a love for music. My mum tried to remove me from that school when it was closing down to send me to Edmonton. That was a mistake, because I then suffered racism, because it was a dominantly white school, and racism became really, really, you know, apparent to me, and I wasn't going to be the victim, and I just rebelled. Been bunked off every single day, building speaker boxes, amplifiers, buying records, and by the time I was about 16 years old, I found myself actually putting on my own events with a group of friends from the street. So this was the first time I actually knew what it was like to have my own business, which is a sound system. It was, you know, what we'd done was quite illegal, because we'd go into squats or properties, make a makeshift bar, buy alcohol, sell alcohol with, of course, no licence, and put on events and charge people £3 admission. That was the route I knew I was going to go on. I loved music at that point, and I knew I could make money out of being involved in the music industry. My mum was furious, and she still wanted a good career for me, as she described a career. She'd worked at the post office at the time, in the canteen, and she managed to pull a favour. The favour was basically to get me an apprenticeship with BT, British Telecom, which it had just changed into. So I was set upon this new career to go to Bunhill Road College, and I was destined to be a BT engineer. That didn't last very long. I went to the college, had a falling out with the teacher, threatened to stab him with a screwdriver. I was expelled from the college, but what was good was I learned lots about how to make circuit boards and build amplifiers and do stuff like that. Again, I've moved further into the sound system culture. My mum still wanted to get a career for me, so she managed to beg Waltham Forest College to take me. I went there, and at that point, again, I got up to my old tricks, tactics. I was in there, I became very wayward, started terrorising people in there, and effectively I was kicked out. But I decided to use my brain when I was confronted, obviously, by the lecturers, and they said to me, "Your behaviour is just, it's just not normal. What is it? Are you taking drugs?" So of course I didn't take drugs at the time, but I thought this is a great excuse. So I said, "Yes, I've got a strong addiction to drugs." And they said, "What drugs?" First thing in my head, I said heroin, which was a complete lie. He freaked out. I had this massive lecture, but then next thing I knew, Mum and Dad were being wheeled up to the college. To their great embarrassment, now they knew damn well I was lying, but they then had to obviously go along with a get-up. One thing did come of it. They actually passed me and actually came out as a technical engineer without sitting in any exams. But it was a huge embarrassment for my parents. And after that, they just kind of figured out, you know, I wasn't going to go that way. But, you know, at this time, it was pretty fair to say I was wayward and kind of starting to spiral a little bit out of control. So basically, my first kind of interaction with smuggling, I think, was when we went on holiday to Jamaica, and I was about 6 or 7 years old, and we were coming back through the airport basically, and I remember our luggage being incredibly heavy. And when we got through customs and got home, I remember Mum and Dad taking out the 2 suitcases and opening them, and they were full of bottles of white rum. Well, white rum at that time was illegal to bring into the country because it was overproof, but all the relatives and friends and family wanted white rum. So what they'd done was they'd smuggled a load of it back, which was normal practice because people would do it. They'd smuggle food through, things like that, because, you know, it's something you wanted. But the first experience with real smuggling came when my parents used to go down to Silvertown Docks, where the Tate and Lyle sugar factory was. One of who I describe as one of my uncles, extended family, wasn't a blood relative, but my mum had helped actually bring him to this country. And when he'd come to England, he was already an established music promoter. He was very good friends with Bob Marley and the Marleys, Rita particularly. You know, he'd been a smuggler. Well, I remember one particular day, evening actually, we were driving down to the docks and seeing his car pull in. A beautiful car it was beside my parents' car, where I was obviously sitting in the back. I was left in the car on that occasion on my own. Could have been about 5 or 6 actually. My mum and dad went onto the ship, and in the dark of the night I heard boom, like, and then boom, and the car park, and it was like, what are these noises? So as I looked more carefully, I saw his car, the boot, suddenly open. Anyway, a little guy climbed out of the back, and what he was doing was he was picking up these square blocks, and as I looked more carefully, someone was throwing them off of the ship into the car park. So I collected the blocks, put them in the trunk of the car, then jumped back in the trunk of the car and pulled the boot back on himself. And of course, when everyone was coming off of the ship, walking down, you're in sight obviously of the customs officer, because this time he's now looking to see any goings-ons. And just jumped back in the car and he drove off smoothly, and so did obviously my parents. I was more excited that I had a little pair of bongo drums coming off the ship with the sugar cane and the yams and the mangoes that my mum and dad were going there to collect. But that was my first experience of real smuggling. Well, the warehouse parties actually came in by accident. I never forget, I was about 18 and I was working at the shop, and some friends came in and they said to me there was a party they wanted to do, or a party was going on, and they needed a sound system for it. I built a sound system, and the sound system was obviously speakers, amplifiers, you know, all this stuff. And I said, yeah, not a problem. Anyway, this event was at Oxford House in Bethnal Green. So I turned up with my sound system, and the event was just insane. Where I turned up with my style of music, expecting to maybe play some records and do this, they brought their own DJ in. The music was mad. You know, I had a strobe light which was constantly going. And I basically walked out the event just thinking, what the fuck was that? You know, people were off their heads, you know, in their arms, shirts off. I'd never heard of ecstasy, really. I hadn't taken Class A drugs. I smoked weed, you know, never taken cocaine, never taken ecstasy, never heard of ecstasy, really. But then what happened was, a week later, they wanted to do another event. And I thought, this is pretty good business because I'm always going to get paid. I've got the system, you know, it's working for me. And it seemed quite easy money. But then the more that month started to kind of move through, it was literally event, Friday night event, Saturday night. So, you know, I was taking £500 a night. So I was getting like £1,000 a week out of a sand, which was incredibly good money, you know, and it was all mine. And I thought, this is brilliant. By sort of 6 weeks into this mad journey, I then realised there was something there to be had. And I started to like the people, like the scene, like what was going on, because it was peaceful, it was integrated, and more black people coming into this scene now. And everyone was on a very peaceful, loving vibe. It wasn't what I'd left behind where everyone was arrogant, had attitudes, do you know what I mean? And it was a very tense environment going out. This was suddenly somewhere that everyone went and they enjoyed themselves genuinely. So I came in as partners on a few of those events, and then where things really changed was in the middle of 1988, and I knew there was definitely a space to do something bigger. And one day I went by some friends' houses, and a guy was there, introduced me as Wayne. They were on the clubbing scene. I was heavily involved in the clubbing scene, and we all kind of hooked up. We'd go out to Camden Palace or Spectrum, and I said to Wayne, look, you know, I'm going to do some parties. I really want to, you know, put on something because there's a massive market in place. I've got all the sound system stuff. I've got all the equipment. Do you know what I mean? I've got the number of records. I know all the DJs. You know, let's kind of go for this. And he found a warehouse, which I didn't have, and that was in Aldgate. And it was December the 10th, I believe, 1988, we put our first Genesis party on. But what we've done was we set a footprint, and Genesis obviously now is a brand. And then we were just incredibly lucky after that, if I'm honest. Wayne's friend came along, Keith, and then said he had a warehouse for us. And that was Leaside Road. And we put an event on Leaside Road, but the real golden cookie came when we were preparing for that event. A guy came through the door who I knew as Tony Colson-Hater, and he had been doing a very small event called Apocalypse Now, which I'd done their sound for them on one occasion in Hackney Wick. But he just converted a new system called Sunrise. And we said, okay, you know, let's put on some parties together. So we put on a series of events, which was Genesis Sunset, because you didn't call it Sunrise at the time. And we got 3,000 people there the first week. Following, which was like Boxing Day, we went back there again, Christmas Eve. We got like 4,000 people. Then we went back in there New Year's Eve, and we hit the jackpot. You know, we had 6,000 people. And then we thought, well, you can't get bigger than that. And then we ended up going the following week, which was the following Saturday, expecting a lesser crowd. We got 8,000 people, and it was just growing. The beauty about the warehouse was the Springboks factory. It was just layers and layers of floors. You know, it was like you just couldn't describe it. It was like an endless building which wrapped the corner of the road. You know, we had amazing stories. New Year's Eve when we had that party, the police turned up with a fire inspector, you know, went to close the stand. And the fire inspector, he was, you know, they must have called him from his party, wherever he was, and we thought, shit, fire inspector's coming, we're in trouble. So we had about 50 black bags full of rubbish, literally. We took them all, threw them out the side gate, you know, that literally giant stack of stuff. Fire inspector turned up there with his police inspector. He just looked like that around the building, didn't even do a thing, opened the door, looked out the door, and just goes, great, fine to have their party. The police inspector was absolutely pissed. The party went on. We'd kind of becoming unstoppable.
People wanted to party, and Pritchard made it happen. He mobilised legions of revellers to descend upon unsuspecting villagers in their thousands. The government tasked Ken Tappenden with the tough job of breaking up the party.
The organisers were better than we were. I only wish I had them as my lieutenants, because they were brilliant.
Where we fell down, unfortunately, was it turned out that what we thought was our legal warehouse, because Keith had come with this bit of paper and said he'd written it from the guy, turned out that guy was a bloody squatter. So he was actually squatting in the warehouse. But we then started to move from warehouse to warehouse to warehouse, and Genesis grew as Sunrise grew with us. And then eventually we figured we didn't need Sunrise anymore, so Genesis went off and we found our own warehouse, which was Ferry Lane, which was just off of Tottenham. And again, we had a great string of success. We had problems because obviously making money like that, it would have meant that we were going to attract the wrong kind of people and eventually would have been robbed. It would have been inevitable because armed robbers were going out and they were, you know, holding up vans and getting 20 grand. You know, if you hit a warehouse, you're going to walk away with 200 grand. It's a no-brainer. So we had to bring in a tougher security team, which we've done. They came with a history. And probably the worst thing that happened was they tagged themselves as a G-force, which effectively meant, you know, they were part of what we were. Eventually they wanted a part of the action, which I felt was fair. They wanted to take 25%. Well, that was fine. I had 25%, Keith had 25%, Wayne had 25%, and between 12 of them, they had 25%. But the problem was they didn't stop there. They decided they wanted to take over all the doors in London. So they turned up at other promoters and they were putting it on them and they were doing all kinds of stuff, and that was bringing a lot of police attention. And the police weren't looking at them as a criminal enterprise. They were looking at us as a criminal enterprise because they were branded as a G-force, and Genesis obviously is Genesis. Everyone knows who Genesis is, and you know, a lot of heat got brought down on us as a result of that. And inevitably, the story unfortunately came to a sour ending. I describe it as the day the music died, because it was no longer a fun-loving scene. You know, people had got involved who weren't really part of the scene, who were looking at it purely as opportunity, obviously, to, you know, have as much influence in London's underworld as they could. And it soured what we'd done initially as something which was, you know, 3 young guys, you know, living this amazing lifestyle, if you can imagine, you know, 18, 19-year-old taking all this money, you know, having all these girls, having all this amazing, like, you're treated like celebrities. We took over the West End, you know. That year, we were put in Eminent magazine as the best event of 1988, you know. And this is a rock and roll magazine. This is major, you know, music press. So we were on a spiral and we were doing incredibly well, but we didn't have the guidance at the time to do what we should have done. We should have turned it into a commercial brand and got a license and, you know, went into a venue and got someone involved with us, you know, who had experience and wealth behind them. And we would have been Ministry of Sound, let's face it, because they came in after us and they basically took what we had, you know, but that could have been us. But we were young, inexperienced and stupid, but we learned.
For more information and the information hotlines, please stay tuned. Genesis Live and Kenya.
The raves were a moment in time, and as they died out, Andrew turned to smuggling. His luck ran out when he was caught meeting half a ton of cocaine with a street value of £100 million.
Customs officers say they've seized over half a ton of cocaine in a shipment of coconuts from Guyana. 6 men were arrested in the operation in East London last night. The drugs have a street value of £100 million.
I think the first time I really got involved in serious smuggling was after warehouse parties. I wasn't really involved in drugs during the warehouse party scene in terms of selling. After the parties came to an end, I realised that ecstasy was big business, and I realised I was at the hub of it, because even though the parties had finished, because I was such a prominent promoter, I was connected to every single person who was either a major player in selling ecstasy or who was manufacturing it or was selling it. So I found myself uniquely poised. I knew everyone because of my parties brought them all together. So I realised if I was able to make a contact where I could get that product at a good enough price, I could put it to the right people and make a substantial profit. I found that connection. Some people I knew, older criminals, were manufacturing it. And it was an opportunity for me. And I got involved, and I had some great customers that would buy, you know, huge amounts in bulk wholesale. And I started to get involved in that side of the business, till eventually, you know, we were moving around 250,000 tablets a month, which is a huge amount given the amount of people that used to go out at that time. So I'd say we probably had maybe a 20-30% share in the market, which was massive, you know. And that was obviously manufacturing involvement of drugs. But then getting into smuggling, I had an incident which I decided it was best for me to, you know, leave the country, and I went to Jamaica. And I got there, I settled down, I fell in love. I married a Miss Jamaica, had a son, and I tried to be a family man, but as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I realised, obviously, you know, I was sitting on an island which grew a product which was more valuable than gold and came to nothing. All I needed to do was find someone back home in England that had a vent in the customs or some route in, and I could be making serious money. And I found routes in, basically. So, and obviously I went to a family friend who was a very big player in the business in Jamaica and in the Caribbean. He taught me this business of smuggling, you know. I started then to find it adventurous. You know, he would take me to the country where we'd buy the product, and you know, we'd set up our own smuggling camps. So effectively, you know, you'd be out in the bush, you'd build temporary tents with tarpaulins, and you'd have people bringing in the weed, local farmers. You'd have women manicuring it, which is removing the sticks and the seeds, and that will be then put into a massive tarpaulin in the middle of the camp. That had been brought all together. It'd be put into plastic bags, it would be weighed, be brought into a contraption which is a press. Guys would be pressing it, then it'd be wrapped, which is the first layer of cellophanes put on it. Then you put tape over the top of that. Then it'd be beaten down with a chemical we'd produce from pimento leaves, which would initially beat the dog smell. Then it'd be brought into ambulances, or we'd put it on sugarcane lorries and drive it into Kingston from the country. And then from there, we'd warehouse it, we'd wrap it again, we'd, you know, put chemicals on it again to deter the dog, we refer to it as dog repellent. And then we used our contacts in the airport, our contacts at the wharf, to bring it into this country through various methods. Dominantly, you know, fruit markets and places like that. I had an extended family basically who were high level smugglers, and they kind of were able to give me the protection that I needed, and the access, the gateways to the docks, you know, and the introductions to all the major sort of players. Where I was fortunate, I had a lot of criminal associates here in London who were, you know, English guys, you know, South London, East London, you know, quite well-known criminals, but they were all terrified to work in Jamaica because the, you know, odds of getting ripped off were incredibly high. So the attempts I had made to work in Jamaica, they'd been ripped off as well. Where I was successful was the fact that I had the installation, so they knew if they came and saw me, they would definitely be able to get the product. They would definitely get the product shipped from the island. Their biggest concern obviously was to get it through the gate here and to sell it. And that wasn't really too hard to do. So it was a good business that grew rapidly based on those principles.
How it works is very simple. Customs officers are paid, flag a container so as they secure it, so as no one else can trouble it. It's held by their team, passes through X-ray, which their men work on the X-ray, and it's released, and that's how it's done.
I think what happens is you start to believe your own hype when you get involved in things like this, and you start to think that you're invincible. And the more you do it, the more success you have, the more invincible you become. The more you do, the bigger profits you get, and you can afford to lose them. If you're losing them, someone's catching them, and that's the police or the customs. So without even really being aware of it, you're actually, you know, you're on their radar. That's why you're losing the stuff. And it's a matter of time before they're gonna, you know, be able to come down on you. And you just keep going. It's almost like, it's like a feeding frenzy, you know? You're constantly, you know, doing it because you think, I can't get enough of this.
Andrew is no stranger to running complex operations. He made his name in the music industry, promoting A-list artists and staging major music events. The Sunsplash Festival attracted over 50,000 revelers.
Welcome, baby. How you doing? Always wanted to meet one of the Spices, you know.
I've had a lot of business partners, who've been murdered. Probably the most significant act that happened was one of my business partners, Blacker Dooch, who taught me a lot. Blacker used to, he was what I describe as a Don. He looked after an area of Jonestown, which is part of Jungle, and he went for a meeting with a guy called Willie Huggett, who was Maxfield Avenue Don, Black Roses. And he was sitting there with Willie and Bunny, and a car drove into the constituency. What was a white Corolla, which could be looked at as an undercover police car. And when the car rolled up on them, a Blacker who had a licensed firearm produced it from his belt and said, "This is a licensed firearm." And three guys just lifted AK-47 machine guns and opened fire on them all. The ruins were so horrific. One person that had managed to kind of hide under a car had said the gunman went over the top of Blacker after his leg had been basically disjointed with one of the bullets, which ripped it away, and pumped two more shells straight through his head to make sure everyone was dead. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that happened. Had I been in Jamaica, I would have been the fourth guy sitting on that pavement. So it's a real dangerous lifestyle, but you don't think about it when you're so deeply embedded into it. I was doing what I was doing to a great level of success. Again, I thought I was invincible because we had a complete team of customs officers in our back pocket at the docks here. We had a large importation arrive, and the customs officers who we had paid off, who were working for us, who were supposed to clear the containers, did what they were paid to do, but another team of police officers had one of my associates under surveillance. So they rocked up at the wharf after something they'd heard on a phone tap and started pulling open containers that had already been cleared.
Customs claim that Andrew's arrest was the result of months of international undercover and surveillance work, codenamed Operation Cyprus. They had tracked the container for months through the Caribbean, monitoring all those they thought were involved in the smuggling operation.
In London, they were on to Andrew Pritchard and his associates, trying to anticipate when they would move. When Andrew came to meet the consignment, Customs made their move. He was caught red-handed, just outside the market. It seemed this was a cut-and-dry case.
Hands up, I'm a smuggler. I'm not going to Terence, so I'm not. I'm a villain. I smuggle containers. It's what I do. I'm not a drug smuggler.
The prosecution said you were a mastermind, a fixer.
Prosecution say I was going to be taking my cocaine. According to them, to have pressed, to double the amount of it. They say not only did I organise it all, they said I also was responsible for distributing it as well. There's a lot for one man to do, isn't it?
And on that occasion, they discovered 1/2 ton of cocaine cradled in the back of one of them. Fortunately, I was very lucky because you could never underestimate greed. The team of police that had actually discovered the drugs and brought the prosecution down had been reading public interest immunity papers, which are documents generated by the state on us from various agencies, from DEA, Metropolitan Police, Customs and Excise. And some of those documents, showed large amounts of money. One particular stated that my co-defendant had £9 million in euros hidden in the boot of one of his cars in East London. So naturally, greed got the better of them, reading these documents, and an approach was made basically to destroy their own case for £250,000.
The documents are top-secret customs intelligence files about Operation Cyprus. Somehow they have been taken out of Customs HQ, into prison and under the cell doors of Andrew and his co-defendants.
Are you an architect in the distribution of the documents?
You're a sensible man, but I've been in prison for 17 months. How could I, in any way whatsoever, be responsible for something like that?
Did you have anything involvement in this?
Documents appeared in prison, and up to this day, we don't know how they got there. Envelopes were coming underneath people's doors. So obviously it's a prison officer who was obviously getting paid by whoever to bring these documents in, and how they were getting out of Customs House obviously is another interesting, theory. But no, nothing whatsoever. That would be perverting the course of justice, Donald.
And you would have
I
nothing
would never break the law like that.
These documents are far too sensitive to be ever shown to a jury, but their existence will become public by other means, clouding the waters for the jury. They find their way onto the internet, and for maximum exposure, a pirate radio station broadcasts the website address.
This message reads, special request for anyone who's had problems with custom and excise. Look at this website, justiceandcrime.tk. Yeah?
And what did happen was, unbeknown to me at the time, because I thought I was going to be basically, put on a stake and burnt, I was approached by a TV company when I was in prison on remand, and they asked if they could make a documentary about what was going on. Traditionally, I would go near a camera, ever, because that's not the way, a smuggler or a criminal operates. You stay as far away from publicity as you possibly can. But I thought I was definitely going to be convicted, and I thought if it goes on TV what's going on, the shenanigans, at least I'd be in for an appeal. Well, it turned out we had 2 trials. The first trial was a hung jury, and 4 defendants got acquitted, and the second trial came back as a hung jury, and the rest of us were acquitted. But the problem was the documentary was already being made, and it was going to be broadcast. So after I'd been acquitted, the programme was due to be broadcast. The programme was broadcast, so effectively the genie was out of the bottle. And then obviously I was catapulted to notoriety, and I suppose I wanted to cash in on that and capitalise on that, so I was offered a book deal. I took that, which, again, was for the wrong reasons. It was a vanity project, because your ego tells you that, you're greater than what you are, especially when you win a case like that. And that was how I got catapulted into it. To be honest to you, my mindset was completely, when I think about it, insane. Because being arrested, I'd been arrested for the biggest drugs importation in British history. And it was all over the news. And as a criminal, this is how insane it is, I actually felt, proud. Because I used to have been nicked. I've been nicked for something massive. Not thinking, if I go to prison, I'm going to go for 35 years. You're thinking that, whatever it is, no one's done it bigger. What it done to my family was terrible, because the realisation of what I'd been arrested for hit them and affected them, and as I said, that damage was irreversible. But, it's the mentality of a criminal. Well, at that time I had, obviously, my 2 older sons, who lived out in the States with their mothers, and I had my fiancée Amber, who I'd met when I was sort of 18 years old, when she was sort of 17, and I was doing warehouse parties. We'd been together, we were engaged, and my youngest son wasn't born yet, and basically she stood by me 100%, which was a very good thing. My family stood by me 100%. And luckily, I came out of it, as relatively unscathed as one person could, being thrown so deeply into the lion's den. But it's an experience. It's drawing on everybody, isn't it? At the end of the day, when the wheel comes off, which it inevitably will, you're left with nothing. I'd ended up in prison at an age which wasn't a great age to go to prison, because I was over 40. If you go to prison when you're 30 or 25 and you get a long sentence, that's one thing. But when you're at a certain age, you've got things, you've got families, you've got assets. So I kicked myself for that, but at the same time, what happened at the end of the day, you know, I was thrown to the lions by someone I thought was a friend. You know, it was a bittersweet situation because what I took from this sentence was that I was able to really reflect on what I'd done, you know, and I looked at it, I'd never thought before I was destroying lives, but I thought to myself, I've destroyed thousands of lives here, but doing what I was doing for all these years and getting away with it, the consequences of all the people who became drug addicts, the destruction they had on their families, you know, and everybody else in that chain, you know, and the wider parameter that had suffered because of me wanting to live a great lifestyle, you know, these people were living lives of misery. And I come to realisation with that, and I wanted to do something about it. And for the first time, I can honestly say I actually decided to change. I've been around everybody. I was put in high category prisoner, you know, which meant I was a serious risk to society as far as I was concerned, you know. Probably 95% people in there were, you know, in there for murder. You know, we had 40 cells on one wing. The sentence time was over 1,000 years. It's a place of despair, you know. It's not like a remand prison. It's the depths of where the government want to put you if you'd never be able to get out of or see the light of day. And that was just, you know, a wake-up call in a big way. And again, it was something, seeing young people in there, you know, who had barely lived, were spending the rest of their lives in prison. But, you know, I'm not angry or upset by that. You know, I've had to let that go because life goes on and, you know, you deal with it. I'll take it as a learning experience. Had this not happened to me, I wouldn't have took the path I've taken in my life now, you know, which is for the better good of young people and trying to change lives moving forward. Prisoners vary from prison to prison. You know, a dispersal prison is pretty straightforward. You get up 7 o'clock when the doors are opened. You've actually got kitchens and stuff on the wing, so you can, you know, prepare something to eat if you wish, really quickly, because obviously there's a lockdown. And then you'll have to go to work. You go through various metal detectors as you leave your cell onto the landing. You're searched. You're wanded by the metal detector. You go through a door, which is another metal detector, heat sinks, you've got anything in your body. Then you walk along the corridors and then you enter the workplace you're in. Then again, you go through more security checks. And this is an everyday occurrence. And it's just like a Groundhog Day. You wake up, you do the same thing over and over and over again. And what's terrible, you're wishing time away. It's all right when you're young, but when you're not so young and you're wishing your time away, it's a terrible thing. What I'd done with my mind was, I'm a very proactive person. So rather than just sit down and sort of feel sorry for myself, I set about planning what I would do when I did get released, you know? And that was like, you know, multiple businesses, you know, working in rehabilitation and really wanting to do things that would actually make back up for the time I'd lost. Where reality was set about was when I was in Belmarsh, when I saw the amount of violence taking place between, you know, young people, because there was constantly disruption with gangs and violence and, you know, bitterness. And I was looking around and seeing a lot of these kids who, they never knew understood who their parents or their families were, you know. And the sad thing, as I said earlier, you know, as a child, we grew up around our cousins, and there's kids killing each other, and you don't even know. Some of them are blood relatives, some are extended family, and they're killing each other because of a postcode. Which, what? They don't need real estate in those postcodes, you know, but they're spilling blood every day. Where's it all ending? Well, you know, it was very hard for me. My mother had become seriously ill during the time I was in prison. She'd had advanced dementia and other medical conditions. So I had tried to spend as much time as I could with her. My father, again, had lots of medical conditions wrong with him. Sadly, my mother passed away not long after I came out of prison. I was just grateful that I was able to be there when she did pass away, you know, because I had the biggest fear in my mind. She'd always said to me, you know, don't come to the funeral if you're coming in handcuffs. And she said that from when I was about 18 years old, because, you know, she knew the road I was on. And that always stayed in my mind during that whole sentence. And, yeah, so that was sad that I'd missed quality time with her. such a wise, clever woman. And my father too, who passed away shortly after my mum. He died of a broken heart, if the truth be known. They've been together over 60 years, which is a strong marriage, which you don't see anymore. But, you know, two massive regrets, you know, the ones, they're gone. I can't make up for that. My kids, I can. My loved ones, I can, because, you know, they're still here, right? Rehabilitation is in 4 steps or 5 steps, you know, and it has to start first. Before you rehabilitate, try to work as intervention, you know, get there before the problem happens. If that's too late, rehabilitation is something, you just don't tell someone, stop selling drugs. The kid's going to look at you and say, well, what the hell am I going to do? At least you've got an answer or a solution to that problem. Keep your mouth shut, you know, but I don't want to keep my mouth shut. I want to give a solution to that problem. So, you know, rehabilitation, look at what you've done, look what's made you go on that road, and guess what? I'm going to give you skills, I'm going to train you, and when I've done that, I'm going to employ you, you know, and that's the key, that's the Trinity, the Holy Trinity. Once you've got that right, you know, someone can look and say, okay, well, I've learned something new. You know, I've took my skills that I thought were my skills, and a lot of kids are very, very wise, you know, they know what they're doing. They're out there selling a product that can't even be marketed or advertised, yet they sell it as soon as they got it. You know, why can't you turn it into selling, you know, T-shirts or brands or, you know, your own shop, your own business? You can do stuff like that. You know, you've got the ability to do it, it's proven. You know, just give you the kickstart that you need to support the shepherding, to get you past those initial hurdles where you may fall. And, you know, that's the first step. And make sure that you're okay, they can get a living, and then make sure they're properly protected in the environment they are. You know, and that's down to housing, where you're, you know, where you're put. Are you put back on the same estate where you're just coming from to mix with the same people to get back into the same problems? No. You know, the change needs to be made now. Because everyone deserves a second chance in life, because everyone and anyone can make a mistake, and sometimes you can make a mistake more than once. It doesn't turn around and say that that person can't be rehabilitated. They can be. They just have to be given that time in their life that comes, or that window of opportunity arises, and they'll walk through that door. We're supposed to live in a civilised society, you know, where we're not hanging people or killing people or torturing people. So if we're not doing these kind of things, why can't we give people second chances? Why can't we actually understand that people who have had experiences, the worst experiences, the hardest experiences, are the greatest ones to become the future mentors, the future teachers, the people who can actually say, I've lived there, been there, seen it, done it. So listen to what I've got to say, you know. If you can change one life, you know, it's an accomplishment. I think it's very important, it's close to my heart, because I never want to put any parent through what I put my parents through. So if you can rehabilitate one person and change their life, it stops that whole chain reaction and the misery it's going to cause everyone else. And also it makes them, gives them the ability to be able to tell others, you know, and change other lives. And I think that's what's so important, you know, it's a message that has to be clearly spelled out. And once you've got the skills to know what makes it turn and makes it work, it's so valuable. My hopes and aspirations are basically to make a difference, you know, just like make a difference that, you know, it says I make a difference. You know, I don't want to get no medal stuck on my chest. I just want to actually generally, you know, feel good and know that I've accomplished something and I've changed lives, you know, and I've taken a negative and turned it into a positive. So all the bad experiences and all the pain maybe that it's caused my family and my parents who are no longer here to, you know, to see this, I want to, in their memory at least, know that, you know, I've gone through this, and I put them through this, but something positive has come of it that will change other lives. It's work in progress still. I think my parents would be very proud, you know, to know that I can take a negative and turn it into a positive. And, you know, they were community people. They wanted to help people all their lives. That's what they've done. And I want to be able to carry on that baton and move forward, you know, and be able to make a contribution and do something positive, to turn around and say, you know, I was here, you know, and it lives in your legacy, you know. And as I said, not beating my chest just yet, you know, let's get results. It's work in progress. I want it to happen. I'm determined to make it happen and bring as many people as I possibly can with it. Well, the AP Foundation basically was formed on my release from prison, and the aim of it is basically to offer 5-step progress for people. You know, young people getting involved in intervention before they get themselves into trouble or into prison, dealing with people who are in prison in terms of rehabilitation, offer courses, offer skills, offer training, you know, and those 4 steps, skills, training, intervention and rehabilitation are key. But the 5th most important thing is housing, you know. Offer social housing that can house people so they have a roof over their heads, so they know where they're going every night to sleep, you know, and they're waking every morning to get on with their lives in a progressive way.
Can you resist the good deal? The white boy gene, the Del Boy gene, you've got to curb that.
Never in a million years, the answer to that. Of course I'm up for a deal, you know, but choosing more selectively next time, I think.
I've lived my life the way I've lived my life. I've lived my life my way, and that's something which is irreplaceable. So you've got to take the sweets with the sours, you know, and from every, you know, bad experience, you're supposed to learn something from it and take away from that and apply it to something different. And every experience, everything I've done in my life, I've done, it's happened, and I won't close the curtain of it. I've had an amazing life, I've had a great life. You know, I've had the greatest highs and I've had the lowest lows, you know, but what I've got behind me is experience. And if with experience you're able to talk to people who maybe are misguided or maybe are, you know, can be influenced, you know, and rather than taking negative influences in life, I'd want to draw positivity towards them, you know. Well, first of all, understand it's all a lie. Everything you're told, how glamorous it is, this life of crime, is a lie. People aren't your friends. Everyone's out to what they can get from you or climb on your shoulders. And that's the reality of it. It's a dog-eat-dog world situations. So what would I say? If you've got a skill, you've got a talent, okay, you haven't got to get it through selling drugs or through shooting people or doing any kind of things. You can take it and put it into a positive agenda. You can move it forward. You know, you can, you know, set up your own business, get respected on a different level, be respected by communities, be respected by ordinary people. Wake up in the morning, feel proud of yourself. You know, your conscience be your guide. Be a person that you can look at your kids and know your kids are proud of you. If you or anyone you know is being affected by any of the issues mentioned in this video, or if you'd like to be involved, please contact us via email, visit our website, or talk to us on social media. Links to all will be in the description.